Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 1981 film Possession. And yes, I actually purchased this film because Matt Brewer, who I'm doing this review for, it was his choice for this month, informed me that this is a must for me to review and watch. And I looked at it, I'm like, I pretty much can't get it other than actually purchasing it because it wasn't available anywhere. And he was like, dude, you'll totally be fine with purchasing it and owning this film. It's really good. Sure, a lot of people don't even know about this film, but if you do end up purchasing it, I mean, it's fancy. It looks really good. It's even got like the pull-out thing, and on the inside, I mean, very interestingly designed. Looks great. But anyway, it's not about looking at that physical media, even though I'm sure people were interested in seeing it briefly. It's about reviewing this film Possession, and it is wild. You're probably going to hear me say the word wild quite a few times in this review, because it's a wild film. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to do my best at the end to kind of say what I saw in it. Now, keep in mind that when I do my reviews, I only watch a film once. Sometimes it's a second time I've seen the film or third time or whatever. But it's usually like in a while. This one, never saw it before, watched it once, took notes, so I'm going to take my best guess at the end at what's really at play with this film, because it's cryptic. Written and directed by Andrzej Zulawski, who also did The Third Part of the Night, The Devil, On the Silver Globe, and Cosmos. Have not seen any of them. This is my first Zulawski film. This is interesting, it was a French-West German co-production. And you can tell this was, during the time of the separation of East and West Germany, because they literally at one point show the wall, which I'm sure was intentional. And in the beginning, they actually show the character of Mark crossing from West to East Germany. Or, I'm sorry, from East to West Germany, I believe. And that was supposed to be signified by, like, all the crumbled buildings then going to, not crumbled buildings that look nicer. It's communist rule to, Western civilization style rule. So yeah, German co-production done in English language with a Polish director, a Kiwi lead actor, and a French lead actress, and most of the other actors in it were German. So a very multinational film. You don't really find that all that often, but they really pulled it off. It's a pretty stunning film. Isabelle Adjani, who plays the character of Anna, has made comments alluding to being kind of abused during the making of the film by Zulawski, and she's actually pointed out that no actress has worked with Zulawski for more than one film. Don't like hearing things like this. Unfortunately, for decades, I'm glad we've gotten past it for the most part, but for decades, it was one of those things where with directors, it was just kind of like, you do what you have to do to get a good performance. And it seems like that's probably what was going on with Zulawski. I mean, we talk about Stanley Kubrick a lot of the time and the mental anguish and torment that he put Shelley Duvall through in order to make The Shining and the lasting, terrible, traumatic effects on her. So it's always very disappointing to hear these things. It's upsetting to hear these things. But I'm glad we've, for the most part, moved past stuff like that. And we're very much more cognizant of it. Anyway, Sam Neill, who played the character of Mark and is a great actor, was cited in this film, has cited this film as his favorite that he's ever been in. I mean, I can see why. Like, the performances in this film are amazing. Like, that, I think that's what sells the film for how kind of, like, out there and crazy it is. It's a combination of the directing is wonderful, the cinematography is wonderful, and the acting is wonderful. And that's what pulls you in and keeps you engaged, because it's a 2-hour film that feels like it's going a little bit long at times. But the thing is, the acting is so magnetic, it just keeps you glued. And the directing is so interesting looking that it just keeps you immersed in the atmosphere and just looking around at all the cool things that are being captured on film. Critics apparently compared this film to the films Repulsion and The Brood. I haven't seen Repulsion, but I've definitely seen The Brood, so I see where that kind of comparison comes into play. The opening music of the film actually feels a bit like 70s Italian horror type vibe to it. It doesn't necessarily stay that way. It's just kind of in the beginning, and it just kind of hit me that way. Maybe I've just seen too much 70s Italian horror, although a lot of people would argue you can never see too much of that. You can immediately tell that Anna and Mark are not close, that there's definitely something wrong in their relationship. And this is kind of the centerpiece of the film. It's really all about their relationship. And the whole thing that's going on, I think, is a metaphor for what goes on in their relationship, which is kind of a commentary on relationships in general. But you can tell immediately that they're not close because of the way they speak to each other. It's not very loving. Also, some other things, like Anna doesn't help Mark with his luggage when he first shows up, and they make a point of showing that, how like he's trying to carry everything and then he still needs to like get this extra bag, because she just kind of walks off. She doesn't take the time to care enough about helping him out. Then there's that shot right after that where they're inside the apartment talking to one another, and they're literally in separate rooms talking to each other. So there's literally walls between them. Like that's a figure of speech of like, there are walls between us because communication is so bad. There's something between the people that's keeping them apart. Literally, they're showing in this, there are walls between Anna and Mark. So I thought that was cool, because plus it's just a cool shot. It looks good. And also note that a lot of the time when they're speaking with each other throughout the film, they're not even looking at each other. Even in the scene in the restaurant where Mark ends up having his freak out and then he has to be tackled by like everyone who works at the restaurant, they start out sitting at separate tables on a corner of like this bench seating. Like they're not even looking at each other when they're speaking. And if you notice that most of the film, they're just not actually looking at each other in the eyes. And that's another way that Zulawski's showing how divided they are. So it's an interesting choice. I think it works really well. It is crazy to me how blunt Anna and Mark are with each other, and it seems to explode during that restaurant scene, the freak out that Mark has. But it explodes constantly. Like, their relationship is so explosive, and it's something. The bluntness threw me off, but I think it's supposed to show kind of how they're operating off this like very base emotion-based animal instinct within their relationship, because things have devolved so much. So that blunt speak, I think, is very intentional in that sense. Mark's decline after breaking it off with Anna actually mirrors withdrawal symptoms, if you really think about it. You know, he's like in bed, he's like shaking, he's sweating, he can't like he loses like 3 weeks. Like he goes to, I assumed it was a situation where he's renting that room and he goes to ask someone, how long have I been here? And they've been like 3 weeks. And he's just like, seems to be miffed by that because it doesn't feel that long. So it's very much withdrawal. So I think this is supposed to be showing that, you know, you get so intensely involved with someone in a relationship, and then when you separate from that person after you've been spending a lot of time with them and you know, are in love with them, that it is like a withdrawal, that your body goes through this motion of like wanting the love, wanting sex, wanting attention, like it's a drug. So that's what they were, I think, trying to bring forward in how Mark goes through it. It's crazy when you find out that Bob was basically abandoned by Anna, and it seems then like Anna's involvement with Heinrich is being treated also like an addiction. She's continually leaving the house, so much so, like if someone who's addicted to drugs, not coming home, not taking care of what's at home. And I think this kind of ties into the whole issue of, you know, Bob is there to kind of show the impacts that bad marriages or marriages in turmoil can end up having on the youth in the family unit. And that's shown very starkly immediately with the fact that Bob's basically just been there alone because Mark's off, you know, having his withdrawal issues, and Anna's off being addicted to being with someone else. Although at this point, you're kind of wondering, if you're watching it a second time, is she off actually being with Heinrich anymore, or has she broken that off at that point? Because you get that idea when Mark goes to see Heinrich, and he's like, she's not here. And she's still not back at the house. And that's when she's going to this other apartment, and she's basically trying to, out of this monstrosity, create a new Mark, in essence, which we eventually get there. And I'll talk more about it when we do. Heinrich is actually oddly calm when Mark confronts him. I found that kind of weird. I just think Heinrich in general is a weird character. I understand why Anna and why Mark are kind of weird characters, because they're supposed to be this like base emotion, base animal instinct type version of humans that have this relationship and are kind of like going through turmoil and trying to make it work. But like Heinrich doesn't really make sense. He's just weird. He's just out there. And he's just very accommodating to Mark when it's a very confrontational situation. All of Anna and Mark's fights are wild. It's a quick descent to becoming like animals. It actually must have been really hard for the actors to shoot those scenes, to get in those headspaces and like stay within them. Because think about how much energy it takes to yell at someone, to like have that heightened energy and be so emotional and angry. Like they were truly doing like method. They were going through it. And they do it so much in the film. It had to be exhausting. Totally exhausting. But they did a great job. And it's part of what keeps the film so engaging. And part of what makes the turmoil in the relationship seem so real and so raw. You are literally like, what the hell is going on when Mark cuts his own arm multiple times with the electric carving knife? Now, I think he was doing it in this moment to kind of mirror the injury that Anna had just had, to kind of like bond with her in that moment and be like, look, if she's going through pain in this relationship right now, I need to be going through pain in this relationship right now. And it kind of does speak to real relationships where if your partner is going through pain, you are going through pain to some degree. Maybe not exactly the same, but close. And you also want to be in it with them. So I think that's kind of what it was trying to show. Like he was connecting to her at that moment, sharing in her pain by creating pain for himself. The investigator doesn't do a great job when he's literally running after Anna. She obviously knows that he's following her. He's like a terrible investigator. And then the horror actually starts when the investigator goes into Anna's ramshackled apartment and has to be dispatched with a broken wine bottle, which I thought was hilarious how it got broken. Like she literally intentionally drops in and is like, oops, it broke. And then she shows up with the broken piece in the bathroom where the very gnarly looking thing is. And then, so yeah, that's when the horror really starts. And it's not super present in the film. Like those horror moments don't keep showing up, but it's enough and they're effective enough that it's definitely a horror film. I mean, you really feel that way about it. Is Heinrich on drugs when he goes over to see Mark? All the spinning around that he does and like hitting up against walls. I don't know if it's like he's on drugs or now he's going through a withdrawal because he hasn't seen Anna in some time. Maybe they were trying to say that, or maybe, I don't know, like he was feeling things are off because of Anna's still like presence tied to the apartment that Mark's in, and she's kind of like possessed. Because as the title says, possession. I mean, it on face level, it is a story about possession. There's obviously a more metaphorical, deeper meaning, like the relationship stuff I'm talking about. The reveal of the inspector's new condition, let's call it that, is wild. And then it's gross when Anna says to the other guy who shows up that they made love all night. Like that moment, you're just like, oh, that's so nasty. Because it looks so gross. I mean, the practical effects in this are very good. It looks disgusting. It looks kind of like Lovecraftian in its composition. And then when there's the actual sex scene later, it's so disgusting that it makes me feel... it makes me think about the film Society and the shunting scene in Society, which I'm sure a lot of people know about. And real quick, pause for horror hydration. Yeah, just thinking about that scene makes me want to hydrate. Got to replenish myself. All right, moving on. The scene of Anna talking about faith and chance seems like her emotional dam has basically broken at this point, and she's pouring forth all of her fears and insecurities that she's kind of been holding in. Now, if you think about it, this is really symbolizing that moment in a relationship where things do break down, and someone has a breakdown. They have an emotional breakdown, or both people even do at this point. and they start to lay bare to the other person all of their fears, all of their insecurities about the relationship, about themselves. And it's this whole thing about her basically like having faith and wanting to have faith in everything, but also like the relationship, but also feeling like everything is a chance at the same time. And it's hard to kind of reconcile things like faith versus chance, because faith is, the getting into things and just thinking that, it's all going to work out. It's fine. It's kind of like predetermined and it'll be good. And chance is more of an unsure situation. So it's this dichotomy of her literally feeling split in half between, things will be good, or I really don't know, things could be terrible. So it's a good scene. The scene of Anna in the church just making noises as she's looking up at the statue of Jesus, which note, they then are showing her from above, which is like the statue of Jesus is literally looking at her. Like, it's like Jesus is looking at her, which I think is effectively done. That portion, I think, is kind of her her last-ditch effort to kind of get divine help, because there's still that human, regular part of her left in the body. But the fact that she can't say anything at that moment, I think, is the possession blocking her from asking for divine help at that point. And obviously it never really comes right then. She then has the freak out in the subway that kind of shows the possession has fully taken hold, because she literally goes to her lowest level. She acts like a crazed animal, where she's like taking her groceries, she like throws them up against the wall, she's like flailing around, freaking out. At a few moments it looked like she did some kind of like very metal dance moves, like head banging. And then you get to that scene where she's sitting down and she's oozing red, white, and green, and that's crazy. Like, that is a crazy possession moment. And I'm gonna say this has got to be one of my favorite possession films. I mean, it's definitely up there with The Exorcist. I typically don't really like possession films, so for this film to like actually make me enjoy it says a lot. But that scene, totally crazy. Great visual, though, the way they pulled it out. Like the red, green, and white just like oozing out. It's like, whoa. The next scene, Mark says for the first time that Anna looks vulgar to him. So I believe that's the moment that he's seeing the possession in her fully, because prior to that, he keeps saying how much he loves her, he wants to be with her, all that stuff. And then he literally says, after she has this full-on possession freak out, for the first time you look vulgar to me. He's seeing the bad in her. He's seeing the change. She is not the person that he entered this relationship with. It's been devolving, but it's at that point that he hits emotional and relationship rock bottom. I like how Mark says, she's possessed, Heinrich can have her, in essence. Like, he finally finds her vulgar, he calls up and is basically like, she's waiting for you, Heinrich, and he's just like, she's all yours. She's possessed, she's all yours, go for it, Heinrich. Because obviously he doesn't like the guy anyway, and knows he'd be putting him in danger. It's surprising, sorry if you hear the helicopter, it happens. It's surprising that Anna lets Heinrich leave the apartment alive. I was very shocked by that, because prior to that, people don't leave alive. The other two people who had shown up don't leave alive. I'm wondering if it has to do with her still feeling like she has feelings for Heinrich on some level, like she has an emotional attachment to some degree still. So she lets him leave alive. But other than that, it didn't make sense. But especially because at the moment you feel like she's fully possessed. Mark, just being in the apartment, makes him possessed, basically. You get it from his kind of off-looking smile that he ends up giving when he's outside of the apartment after he goes in. He has like a bit of a freak out. They do the cool like camera movement around him to show like he's changing. Things are getting crazy. It's disorienting. So it's a good moment. It increases things that way. But he then starts to change. And it's about what happens at this apartment, basically. And then the eventual explosion of the apartment seems to kind of sever, or it creates basically the second Anna. Or no, actually the second Anna I think existed before that, but it's kind of like a clean break. It's getting rid of the source of where the change was coming from for Anna, but the change is already happening now with Mark. So she's like, they're crossing paths at this point. Like, she's going more to the ideal partner side, and he's going more to the non-ideal partner side. And that's why there are two versions of them in the end of the film. But we'll talk more about that in a minute. Mark takes care of Heinrich and the apartment, and as he's covered in blood, Anna accepts him with open arms. He goes through doing the dirty work. It's like he accepts what she's been through. He accepts who she is at that point and her journey, and he's basically starting his after hers. So he's going on the same journey that she was kind of on, in a sense. And so she recognizes that in him, and that's the moment that the love opens back up. And then if you notice, for the first time in the film, they have sex. They had talked about wanting to have sex, or how they weren't really having sex earlier in the film, but they finally have sex. Man, that sex scene reminds you a lot of the Shunting in Society. Yeah, the one where she's having sex with that Lovecraftian, weird, gross thing. They show it a decent amount. I would say if a lot of people had seen this film, it'd be a pretty notorious scene that people would probably talk about. Pretty gross. Not sure why Mark goes to see Heinrich's mother. I don't really understand that. Can someone explain that one to me? Why does he go to see his mother? I don't really get it, but go ahead and put it in the comments. But it does seem like at that moment she dies. She lays down on the bed, and then he takes her hand, and she says something about something alluding to not needing to be around anymore. Did anyone else feel that way about it? Why does Mark have the guy crash the car into the cop car? I don't understand. I guess this is similar to Anna's freak out moment in the subway where she has the full on possession, that he's just at that point as well, where he's totally baseline crazed animal feral. And he's just you crashed this car, gun it, crash the car into this cop car. And then the body rolls out of the back of the car. He's getting shot at. Then he gets on the motorcycle. He's going on the motorcycle. Really cool shots of him going through those alleyways. Looked really cool. Good use of architecture in a lot of shots in this film, which will lead me to a comparison a little bit later. But then he wipes out on the motorcycle. It's crazy. And then the shootout ends up happening, and it's just a nuts ending before you get the very confusing ending at the end. The scene of Anna and Mark kissing as they die is kind of gross, but it's kind of a sweet moment too. These are both of the old versions of them, basically. These are the old versions of them. The tainted Anna, the non-ideal Anna, and the ideal Mark, or what was closest to ideal Mark throughout the film, because he gets worse. His doppelganger, his other kind of is worse. So at the end, there's the version of Anna and Mark. There's the version of Anna that Mark wanted, and the version of Mark that Anna wanted. So this is what the film basically culminates to, is it shows that they have been changed throughout the whole thing. And it's this idea that, they're having this turmoil, they're having a terrible time, and then Anna becomes what she's supposed to be in the mind of Mark, and then Mark becomes what he's supposed to be in the beginning, based on the mind of Anna. But Bob's not having it, obviously, as he goes and just drowns himself in the tub. Is this signaling the destruction of Bob's life due to marital issues, is my question. And is it saying that partners change each other in a family dynamic? That's what I think is kind of being laid bare here, is the idea that when you get into a relationship, you are a certain person. You go through turmoil, and then you become someone else. Because when you're with someone, you're not usually going to stay the same. You guys change each other. Sometimes it's for good, sometimes it's for bad, and it can have an impact on the children in the relationship. And obviously you see in this instance, it's not a good thing, because Bob is afraid of new Anna letting the new Mark in, because he knows that new Mark is not good. So yeah. Shot extremely well. This is kind of my wrap up, but I have a lot to say on the wrap up. It's shot extremely well. It looks great, and it kind of makes me think Stanley Kubrick mixed with a little bit of Dario Argento. If you see what I'm saying, big, kind of wide shots, really taking in architecture, which is very Kubrick, using a lot of negative space, which is very Kubrick, and then also using architecture to great degrees, which is Argento, and a lot of interesting camera movement, which is also very Argento. So I definitely feel like Kubrick and Argento mixed, so it looks good, obviously. There are a lot of camera movements, and the most odd one being that full circular rotation in the room where the business meeting is going on in the very beginning of the film. And that's another moment of, like, lots of negative space. Like, that room is pretty much barren, except for the people in it and the table and the chairs. And it's just kind of, yeah. But, like, the full rotation is kind of weird. I don't really understand the need for it. But, yeah. They also do a lot of shots tilted up and tilted down at characters. They rarely actually shoot characters straight on. This actually creates a surreal kind of off feeling for the viewer, which is great for a film like this because it is surreal. It is off. So to enhance it by using those kind of angles that don't seem natural and don't seem normal necessarily are great. But they're also used for, you know, other things, like I was saying before, like the shot of Anna from the viewpoint of the statue of Jesus. Like, that's used for a different reason. There's strong use of negative space, like I said, which is very, very interesting. Like, negative space, I feel like a lot of times makes characters feel a little smaller. It makes them feel awkward. And obviously that's used well here because there's a lot of awkwardness to the film. The casting of Ajani as Anna is great because she actually has a natural look of innocence in her eyes. She has like those really bright, doughy eyes that just naturally make her look good and innocent. And it's hard to reconcile how she looks as a person naturally and what she's going through and how kind of evil she ends up becoming. It's very interesting, and I love that choice. Also, note that Sam Neill, who plays Mark, he plays Mark as though he's always unsettled and fidgeting. And I think that really helps to keep the audience members also unsettled. Like, notice, he's never just, like, calm. He's always either, like, fighting or, like, moving his hands or something. In the part where he goes to see the investigator, he's swiveling in his chair the entire time. He's always, and then the part where he's on the phone towards the end and he's turning the light switch on and off, he's always fidgeting. He's never sitting still. He's always uncomfortable. And that makes the audience feel uncomfortable because of the constant fidgeting. So I don't know whose choice that was, if that was Zulawski, if that was Neill, or if it was both of them. But it's smart. It's subtle, but it's smart. This seems like it's potentially about the push and pull of a family situation. You want it, but you also want your individual freedom. And in the end, if you stay, you cannot remain yourself. Children can also end up suffering from the ill effects of any sort of marital turmoil. That's my thought on what it means, but I would love to hear other people's theories on it. Go ahead and put it in the comments. It is a hard movie to wrap your head around. I had to take some time to just kind of sit there after the credits rolled to just be like, what do I really think is at play here? So it took me some time, but that's what I've come up with. You know, not going to say it's necessarily what was intended, but I think it works for what I saw in the film. So let's talk about it. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I got to go 4.5 stars. It's a very good film. I can't give it 5. It's not like perfection, but it's really good. 4.5 stars. And Matt Brewer, hopefully you liked this review enough, and you were right. I don't regret purchasing this film, so I'm glad I own it at this point. Like I said, put some comments down there. Let's talk about this film, whether you liked it, didn't like it, whatever. Let me know. Do me a favor, hit subscribe to my channel if you can, and you can. It is quick, painless, costs you no money, and it helps me out a lot. I'm just trying to grow the channel and grow this nerdy horror community I'm trying to create here, and I also want to interact with people. That's what the commenting's about. Also hit the notification bell button because then you'll know when I'm putting up new videos, which I'm doing at least 4 a week at this point, and I put a lot of work into them. I mean, this review alone is almost a half an hour of me just straight up talking to a camera. So if that impresses you at all, because it's exhausting, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I appreciate it. But regardless, thank you very much for taking your time to check out this video, and until next time, keep it brutal.